Nice,
Oh!
big, shot!
Both guys are like...
Rosas Jr. with a huge left.
In combat sports, experience is meant to rule. But what happens when a fighter barely old enough for a learner's permit walks in and drops a UFC veteran? The crowd froze, mouths open, watching the impossible play out. This wasn't your average upset. It was youth colliding with years, raw instinct against tested grit.
Shots, oh, he climbs in! The right hand! Touchdown! Is this it?
Could pure talent really rip through hardened skill? And then it happened. One move from an underdog flipped the entire fight world on its head. At just over 18 years of age, these young fighters shocked the MMA world and destroyed veteran superfighters. Let's start with a fight that showed how one well-timed strike can flip the entire script and silence even the most experienced veterans. Thanh Le's explosive TKO. Have you ever seen a kid so calm it feels wrong? That was Thanh Le. Before the knockout, before the chaos, there he was, just a teenager under the lights, unreadable, almost cold. He wasn't supposed to look that steady, not standing across from a veteran who had bled for years inside cages. But the way he moved, the way he waited, it gave him away. He wasn't ordinary. The fight started, and the truth showed quick. Thanh wasn't just another 18-year-old chasing a dream. He was built in his father's gym, a taekwondo prodigy who grew up with spinning kicks like other kids grew up with breakfast.
Look out for the taekwondo stylings in the kicking arsenal from Thanh Le. And there it is early, tried to take his nose off with a spinning hook kick.
Then he added Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and suddenly you had a fighter who could end a night in seconds. His opponent, Alex Black, was everything the word veteran means. Tough, gritty, hard to break. The bell rang, fists cut the air, kicks snapped in from impossible angles, and for a moment, the cage turned to chaos. Black threw back fire, but Thanh was faster, sharper, hungrier. Then it came, out of nowhere, a spinning heel kick clean as glass, cracked flush on Black's chin. His body froze, then dropped. The crowd exploded. The ref dove in, waving it off in the first round. That wasn't just a knockout. That was an arrival. From that night, whispers became headlines. Who was this kid who fought like a video game come to life? The answer? Nobody cared for long, because soon, another underdog was about to silence an even bigger star. Emanuel Newton's stunning KO. He wasn't the name fans circled on fight cards. He wasn't the guy people thought would headline anything. Emanuel Newton moved quiet. No swagger, no spotlight. But sometimes the blade you don't see is the one that cuts deepest. At Bellator 90, Newton walked in as the afterthought. Across from him stood Muhammad King Mo Lawal, a wrecking machine who crushed fights before they could even breathe. The odds? Laughable. Nobody gave Newton a chance. Nobody except Newton himself. He saw something the crowd missed. Every time Mo unleashed a bomb, his hands dipped, just for a second. Newton circled, patient, waiting. Mo came forward, confident, certain he'd steamroll. Then it landed, an overhand right, thrown with timing so sharp it felt like destiny. The shot detonated on Mo's jaw. The powerhouse crumbled, hitting the mat before the arena even caught up. Silence. Then chaos. Newton had turned from background filler to giant killer in one swing. And when he faced Mo again months later, this time grinding out a decision, the story changed. The word fluke died right there. Newton's name was carved into MMA history with patience, precision, and a single thunderous fist. But if Newton's punch stunned fans, the next debut strike would make jaws drop to the floor. Sean O'Malley, one-punch wonder. Before anyone ever called him Sugar, Sean O'Malley was just a kid drifting between sports, trying to find something that felt right. Basketball, football, even track. He dabbled in all of them, but none of them stuck. Then he walked into a small kickboxing gym, and everything changed. The rhythm of striking, the sound of gloves cracking against pads, the freedom of movement. It lit something in him that no other sport ever had. At first, he was raw, awkward, even reckless. But the more time he spent in the gym, the more he sharpened. And soon, that curiosity turned into obsession. By the time he made his way into the cage, people still saw him as another lanky kid with flashy hair and a style that seemed more show than substance. On March 6, 2015, Sean O'Malley stepped into the intense championship fighting cage with a confidence most rookies don't dare to show. At such a young age, he wasn't supposed to be here, at least not yet. His opponent was a veteran built to humble kids like him. The crowd expected nerves, mistakes, maybe even a beating. Instead, Cian's first clean punch was a lightning bolt. His right hand smashed into his opponent's jaw, and in an instant, the man crumbled to the mat.
He's going to come into play here. Nice roundhouse kick to the face.
Gasps echoed around the venue as the teenager stood over his fallen opponent, barely believing it himself. But O'Malley wasn't done. By the second round, he shifted gears and locked in a slick choke, proving he wasn't just about power. He had skill to match. That night wasn't just a win. It was the birth of a new name in MMA. He walked in looking like a kid with nothing to lose, and walked out a star with the crowd chanting his name. But if a boy's fist could steal the spotlight, a woman's kick was about to shatter an empire. Holly Holm's historic head kick. Every fight fan loves an underdog story, but few believed this would be one of them. Ronda Rousey was the unstoppable force, unbeaten and untouchable, striding into UFC 193 with the confidence of a champion who had never tasted defeat. Her opponents didn't just lose to her, they were swallowed whole, broken before the first round was even done. Standing in her way that night was Holly Holm, a quiet challenger many dismissed as just another victim. To Ronda, she was little more than a formality. She wasn't supposed to win. Holly Holm walked into the cage as the quiet underdog, a former boxer turned mixed martial artist, facing a woman who seemed more myth than fighter. The arena buzzed with the same expectation it always did when Ronda fought. How fast would she finish this one? Holm, calm but almost overlooked, didn't look like the answer to that question. But from the first exchange, something felt different. Her movement, her patience, the way she refused to be bullied, it was as if she was quietly rewriting the story in real time. From the opening bell, that script began to unravel. Holm darted around the cage, her left hand snapping Ronda's head back again and again. The crowd, used to Ronda's dominance, watched as the champion grew desperate, swinging wildly and missing badly. By the second round, fatigue had set in. Then, the moment came. Holm feinted, stepped aside, and launched a head kick that cracked across Ronda's skull with brutal precision. Ronda collapsed, dazed, and Holm swarmed until the referee tore her away. The silence that followed was deafening. Ronda's aura of invincibility had vanished in a single kick. Holm wept in disbelief, her tears proof that history had just shifted before everyone's eyes. But the next upset would come from somewhere nobody expected, an 18-year-old's body shot that ended a fight before it even began. Ramadan Ondash's liver shot KO. He was just a teenager, but he carried himself like someone who had lived inside the fight game his entire life. Calm, sharp, and unshaken, Ramadan Ondash didn't look like a boy stepping into danger. He looked like he belonged there. Born in Lebanon and raised on combat sports since the age of 4, Ramadan wasn't just another teenager chasing a dream. He was already a seasoned machine, with 8 wins on his record. Across from him stood Youngjit Muang En, older, stronger, the kind of fighter everyone expected would teach a brutal lesson about the gap between a prospect and a professional. But when the cage door shut, Ramadan showed no fear. On his one championship debut, from the opening moments, something felt off. Ramadan wasn't backing down. His movements were crisp, his timing unnervingly precise. And then, in a blink, it happened. One perfectly timed left hook to the liver. Youngjit's face twisted in agony, his knees gave out, and within 2 minutes, he was on the canvas. Done. The crowd erupted, stunned that someone barely old enough to drive had just dismantled a veteran. That body shot wasn't just a finish. It was a warning. Ramadan had arrived, and every fighter in the division knew it. At just 17, Ramadan had silenced the arena and devastatingly announced himself. But not every teenage phenom relied on fists. One used strangulation to steal the spotlight. Raul Rosas Jr.'s flawless submission. At first glance, he didn't look like someone who could unravel a grown man in seconds. He was still carrying the face of youth. Raul Rosas Jr. brought into the cage a calm that felt almost unnatural for someone his age. At 17, he became the youngest fighter ever signed by the UFC. Raised in Clovis, New Mexico, he was a jiu-jitsu prodigy before most kids even had a learner's permit. When he made his pro debut, nobody expected a teenager to look this polished. The fight began, and while his opponent came out swinging wild kicks, Rosas stayed icy calm. One mistake, and Rosas pounced, catching a leg, dragging the fight to the mat with the ease of a black belt twice his age. The crowd leaned in, watching the kid flow from one position to another like he was born on the canvas. Seconds later, the choke was in, tight as a vice. It was only a matter of seconds for his opponent, Jay Perrin, to tap out. And Rosas stood up without a scratch on him. That wasn't just a win, it was a message. The new generation wasn't waiting for its turn. Go ahead and hit the like button if Rosas's flawless submission left you just as stunned as the crowd that night. But while Rosas strangled his way to victory, another teenager decided to test his fists against giants. Kirill Sidelnikov's heavyweight upset. What happens when a 19-year-old takes on a man 35 pounds heavier and wins? Enter Kirill Sidelnikov, better known as Fedor Emelianenko's hand-picked protege. At just 19, he wasn't supposed to be wrecking heavyweights, but his debut against Martin Sualsik proved otherwise. Sualsik had the size, the weight, and the intimidation factor. Kirill had none of that, but he did have speed, sharp footwork, and Fedor's training behind him. The fight opened with Sualsik throwing bombs, fists like sledgehammers meant to take Kirill's head off. But the teenager slipped and weaved, his counters snapping Sualsik's head back. Then, the moment came, a right hand straight down the pipe that landed flush. Swalsik dropped instantly. The bigger man folded by a kid barely out of high school. The arena exploded, and just like that, Sidelnikov wasn't just Fedor's student. He was his own name in the heavyweight conversation. And if that wasn't shocking enough, what one high school kid did next would break the internet. Tenshin Nasukawa's spinning kick KO. One spinning kick, one viral knockout, and a teenager became a global sensation. That's the story of Tenshin Nasukawa, a Japanese high schooler who took on Thai veteran Wanchalong PK Sanchai in 2016. Tenshin wasn't your average kid. By 18, he had already built a reputation for wild creativity, flying knees, cartwheel kicks, attacks that look like what you see in a video game. But against a seasoned Thai champion, most thought the tricks would finally run out. They didn't. From the opening bell, Tenshin moved with unreal speed, slipping shots like his body was wired differently. Then, in an instant, he spun, heel whipping around to crash into Wanchalong's jaw. The Thai fighter collapsed unconscious before he hit the mat. The replay spread online like wildfire. Fans dubbed him Matrix Mode for how untouchable he looked. Overnight, Tenshin wasn't just a fighter. He was a global name. The kind of highlight reel knockout people play on repeat. But the ride wasn't over. A Muay Thai teen was waiting with ice-cold precision to carve his own legend. Tawanchai's Muay Thai masterclass. He was only 8 when he first stepped into Petron Ruong Gym, a boy too small for the heavy bags he kicked, but already carrying a presence that drew attention. What began as a childhood pastime quickly turned into a calling. By 12, he wasn't just learning Muay Thai, he was dismantling boys older, stronger, and far more experienced. His rise through the ranks wasn't steady. It was explosive, fueled by raw power and a technique so sharp it left crowds stunned. By 14, Tawanchai made the move to Bangkok, a city where legends are built or broken, and against the backdrop of Thailand's fiercest arenas, he began testing himself against grown men. One of those nights, in 2018, his opponent wasn't just another fighter. It was Kulabdam Sorjor Pyekutai, a veteran known for brute force and relentless pressure. The matchup looked dangerous, almost unfair. But once the bell rang, the danger didn't belong to Tawanchai. It belonged to the man standing in front of him. Tawanchai slipped shots with ice-cold patience, punishing every mistake with stinging counters. His legs whipped into Kulabdam's body and thighs, each strike slowing him piece by piece. By round 4, the once relentless veteran was wincing, his legs betraying him, his rhythm gone. Tawanchai, calm as ever, walked him down and sealed a dominant win. The arena roared, not just for the victory, but for the sheer control the teenager displayed. How does someone that young look so unshakable under fire? But while he picked apart a veteran with discipline, another teen was about to humiliate a troll with fists. Scarface's son. School's a troll. He wasn't a professional, he wasn't famous, he was just a teenager carrying a name heavy enough to draw doubters like moths to a flame. And one of those doubters made the mistake of pushing too far. What started as online trash talk didn't stay online. It spilled into a cage under the sun, with a crowd waiting to see if this kid was all hype or if he carried the same fire as his father. This one doesn't happen under bright lights. It happens in a backyard, In 2024, street beefs turned into a stage for one of the most talked about beatdowns. An Instagram troll had been running his mouth, calling Holm, Scarface's son, a rookie who couldn't fight. The kid didn't bite, but the troll drove all the way from Pennsylvania, swaggering in full gear, ready to prove his point. When the cage door shut, the teen stood calm, arms loose, and eyes locked in. The troll came out swinging wildly, looking for an easy knockout. Instead, he whiffed over and over, while crisp counters stung his face. Each jab chipped away at his overconfidence, the crowd laughing as the tough guy slumped. By the final exchange, the troll's gas tank was empty, his chin wide open, and Holm made him pay. The ref waved it off, and the crowd exploded. Scarface's son had turned an internet clown into a living cautionary tale. That wasn't just a fight, it was justice, backyard style. But while that troll was humbled, another teen was about to silence a seasoned pro in less than a minute. BJJ heavyweight, 30-second submission. One man entered the cage with years of experience carved into every movement. A veteran, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind who had seen almost everything a fight could throw at him. Across from him stood a newcomer, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner whose name barely echoed beyond local circles. He looked calm, almost too quiet, as if unaware of the storm that was about to crash toward him. To the crowd, it seemed obvious that the veteran's power and confidence would drown this quiet rookie in minutes. But what happened next would turn that assumption on its head, and in less than half a minute, the entire arena would be staring in disbelief. The bell rang, and the veteran lunged forward with heavy punches, every swing thrown with bad intentions. The rookie didn't flinch. Instead, he changed levels, snatched a leg, and dragged the fight into his world. Once they hit the mat, it was over before the veteran even knew he was in danger. In less than 30 seconds, the BJJ fighter slithered into position and locked a choke so tight the pro's hands started to flail. The tap came fast, his face turning purple as the crowd erupted in shock. Nobody could believe what they'd just seen. How does a rookie fold a veteran that quickly? That night, the lesson was simple. Technique trumps experience when the ground is this rookie's playground. But while he shocked with speed, another fighter was about to shock with pure flair. Long Hu Men, Lao Tse Kung Fu knockdown. On one side of the cage stood Gwyn C.K., a hardened veteran, every scar and stare telling the story of battles survived. His style was simple, stripped of flair, all grit and force. Across from him, barely 18, was Long Hu Men, a fighter most thought wouldn't last a round. His weapon? An art dismissed as theatrics in the modern fight world, Drunken Kung Fu. To the crowd, it felt like a mismatch. Discipline and steel against unpredictability and show. The bell rang, and what followed looked almost comical at first. When the bell rang, though, the cage turned into a movie scene. Long Hu Men bent and swayed like he was off balance, his movements awkward until they weren't. Every feint drew Gwyn in closer, every grin masking the trap. Then it happened. A sweeping kick so fast it caught Gwyn's ankle clean, sending the veteran spinning to the mat in disbelief. The crowd gasped, some laughing, others just stunned. Long Hu Men didn't hesitate. He pounced, mixing sharp strikes with that same unorthodox rhythm until the ref had no choice but to step in. The arena erupted, and social media lit up instantly. This wasn't supposed to happen. Kung Fu wasn't supposed to work here. But somehow, This teenager had turned an ancient art into a modern upset. And yet, none of these shocks compared to what happened when an 18-year-old walked into the UFC and destroyed a superfighter. Share this wild upset with your friends, because moments like a teenager dropping a veteran with drunken kung fu aren't meant to be kept to yourself. Matt Serra's title-shocking punch. Imagine the biggest underdog in the room landing one punch that flips the UFC upside down. That underdog energy drops us straight into UFC 69, where Matt Serra, scrappy, overlooked, and written off, was thrown against welterweight King George St. Pierre. GSP wasn't just the champ, he was the blueprint. Crisp striking, world-class wrestling, a machine built to dominate. Serra? He was a 10-to-1 underdog, a guy most thought was only there to make the champ look good. The bell rang, and GSP was sharp, picking his shots with surgeon-like precision. But Serra didn't flinch. He stalked, patient, almost daring the champion to give him a crack. Then it happened. A looping right hand came out of nowhere, detonating on GSP's jaw. The Golden Boy staggered, eyes wide, balance gone. Serra pounced like a wolf, raining down punches until the ref had no choice but to step in. The crowd went insane. Matt Serra, the guy no one believed in, was suddenly holding the belt. One punch had turned the fight world on its head. GSP would come back stronger. But that night, the title belonged to the underdog. And while Serra shocked the world, a backyard teenager was about to create chaos of his own. Young Boom's Street Beef's beatdown. What happens when a teenager walks into a fight yard and fights like he's been bred for it? That chaos takes us to Street Beef's 2024, where a kid named Young Boom stepped into the cage with veteran brawler Wyatt. Wyatt was the kind of fighter who'd been through wars, scarred, experienced, ready to grind down anyone. Boom? He was just a teen, but there was something in his eyes. A fire that made people lean in closer. The bell rang, and Boom erupted. His kicks cracked like gunshots, each one digging into Wyatt's ribs, forcing the veteran backward. Wyatt tried to muscle his way in, throwing heavy punches, but the kid's rhythm was relentless. He clinched, dropped elbows, then hammered the body with shots that left Wyatt gasping for air. By the second round, both men were exhausted, but Boom's youth carried him forward. He lit Wyatt up with jabs, then snapped a high kick across his head that sent the crowd into chaos. When the ref raised the teen's hand, everyone knew they'd just witnessed the birth of a new star. But if you thought that was shocking, wait until you hear about the 15-year-old who lied his way into the ring and destroyed a grown man. Tommy Morrison's fake ID KO. This had never happened before. A 15-year-old stepping into the ring with a seasoned heavyweight and beating him. But how did it happen? That's the wild story of Tommy Morrison, the son of heavyweight legend Tommy the Duke Morrison. Morrison forged his way into grown man fights, standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing 200 pounds. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the professional circuit, yet with a fake ID in hand, he found himself face to face with Al, a hardened veteran who thought the night would be nothing more than target practice. When the bell rang, Al went straight to work, jabbing sharp and stiff, testing the boy's chin. Morrison barely blinked. He circled, calm, eyes locked in, waiting for his moment. Then it came. A thunderous left hook ripped across Al's jaw, dropping him flat like a felled tree. The crowd erupted, jaws on the floor. How could a teenager deliver that kind of knockout power. That single punch didn't just end a fight. It announced Morrison as a force of nature. His speed, his strength, his fearlessness, all packed into a 15-year-old frame. It was the night a kid proved he could hang with the big boys, even if he had to cheat his way in to do it. And if that was outrageous, the next upset would shake the very throne of MMA's most untouchable king. Fabricio Werdum's triangle choke. One slick submission was all it took to end the reign of a man everyone thought was unbeatable. That throne-shaking moment came in Strikeforce 2010, when Fabricio Werdum faced the legend himself, Fedor Emelianenko. For a decade, Fedor was the monster under the bed, unbeaten in 33 fights, tearing through heavyweights like they were sparring partners. Werdum, a 6-1 underdog who most figured would last a few minutes before getting crushed. The fight started as everyone expected. Fedor unleashed bombs, dropping Werdum to the mat. The crowd roared, waiting for the finish. But on his back, Werdum was deadly. Calm as ever, he set the trap, legs coiling around Fedor's neck. Suddenly, the crowd's cheers turned to gasps as Werdum cinched in the triangle choke. Fedor's face tightened, his arms flailed, and then the unthinkable. He tapped. The last emperor had fallen.
It looked like he was going to tap there. He's got his arm straight. Oh, he's tapping! He's tapping!
Silence hit the arena before the eruption came. The myth was broken. One submission had ended a decade of dominance. And just when fans thought they'd seen it all, one desperate kick in the UFC shocked the world. Leon Edwards' title-stealing kick. Some fighters get carried by hype, but Leon Edwards wasn't one of them. At UFC 278, he walked in as the underdog against Kamaru Usman, the Nigerian nightmare, unbeaten in 15 fights, dominating everyone in his path. For most of the fight, Usman looked unstoppable again, pinning Edwards down, grinding him out, rounds slipping away. Fans had already written the ending. But Edwards wasn't done. With less than a minute left, he feinted, then whipped his shin across Usman's jaw and cracked. The champ collapsed instantly, lifeless on the canvas. Silence followed, then chaos. A miracle in one perfect kick.
But that is not the cloth from which he is cut. I mean, that is a degenerate.
Edwards didn't just win the belt. He froze the fight world in disbelief. People said it was luck until he beat Usman again, proving it was no accident. That head kick didn't just take gold, it rewrote the division's history. And while Edwards shocked the world, a UFC rookie was about to carve his own piece of history. Sage Northcutt's lightning-fast submission. Imagine being 19 years old, walking into the UFC cage, and the crowd looking at you like you don't belong. That was Sage Northcutt at UFC Fight Night 80 in December 2015, just a teenager, fresh-faced, with the nickname Super Sage. Most fans saw him as flashy, maybe even a little too perfect, but not someone who could finish a hardened veteran. On the other side of the cage stood Cody Pfister, a tough brawler with heavy hands and years of experience. To most, this fight looked like a cruel mismatch. Sage was supposed to be the one learning a painful lesson, but the bell rang and everything flipped. Sage didn't walk forward, he exploded. His movements were sharp, his footwork precise, his karate base obvious with every step. Pfister came swinging, trying to bully the kid, but Sage wasn't there to be bullied. He ducked, slipped, and then, out of nowhere, shot for a takedown. The speed was shocking. In one fluid motion, Sage dragged Pfister to the mat. Before anyone in the arena could process what just happened, Sage's arms wrapped tight around Pfister's neck. It wasn't wild. It wasn't desperate. It was clinical. 57 seconds. That's all it took. A teenager walked into the octagon against a veteran, and before a minute had passed, Pfister's face was turning red, his hands tapping frantically, stating that the fight was already over. The crowd in Houston erupted. People who had laughed at the kid's Hollywood looks were suddenly stunned into silence, then roaring with disbelief. Was this just raw talent, or the birth of something terrifying in the lightweight division? Sage's submission didn't just win a fight, it shattered expectations. A 19-year-old with karate roots had just proved he could choke out a battle-tested pro. And he did it so fast, it felt unreal. Hit the subscribe button now, because stories like Sage's prove that, in the fight game, the impossible can happen in under a minute. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.